I'd like to call the Budget Review Committee to order. It's May 6th, 2025. We're in the Aldermatic Chamber at City Hall, and it's been duly noticed in 2 places, including the city's website, in accordance with the requirements of RSA 91-A:22. Would the clerk please call the roll? Oh, excuse me, before that, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. If you're participating via Zoom, please state your presence, reason for not attending the meeting in person, and whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman Tim Senate.
Here.
Alderman Derek Tebow.
Here.
Alderman John Sullivan.
I'm here via Zoom. As I'm traveling for business, I'm alone in the room and I can hear everybody.
Alderwoman at Large, Shoshana Kelly.
I'm here.
Alderman at Large, Laurie Wilshire.
Here.
Alderman at Large, Michael O'Brien is present. And our chairman, Alderman Richard A. Dowd.
Present.
You have a full attendance, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Also in attendance is Matt Sullivan, Community Development Division Director, William McKinney, Building Manager, Nelson Ortega, Code Enforcement Manager, Deb Chisholm, Sustainability Manager, Sam Durfee, Planning Manager, and Camille Correa, Transit Administrator.
Okay, thank you. Communications?
We have one from Citizen Advisory Commission for Community Grants. Reason, recommendations for local human services agencies for funding for fiscal year 2026. And we also have another one.
Yep.
From Mayor Jim Dornches. Reason, fiscal year 26 budget, civic and community activities.
There being no objection, I'll accept the communications and place them on file. Unfinished business?
There is none.
New business resolutions?
There are none.
New business ordinances?
There is none.
Table in committee?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the motion to remove from the table R-25-143 by roll call, which is the fiscal year budget of the year 2026.
Call the roll.
Okay. Alderman Senate,
Yes.
Alderman Tebow,
Yes.
Alderman Sullivan,
Yes.
Alderwoman Kelly,
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire,
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien votes yea, Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
You have 7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion carries. R-25-143 is back on the table. This evening, we'll be reviewing Community Development Division. And if you want to come up and take seats.
In the lull, Mr. Chairman, we are joined by Alderman Tom Lopez.
Right.
We're going to have to split up, I think, unfortunately.
Oh. This one. Yeah, well, my bag is in the other room.
Welcome, everyone. Before we get into each different department, Director Sullivan, did you want to give an overview and tell us how you're going to proceed?
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Chair. For the record, Matt Sullivan, Community Development Director. I will just take a moment to say that we do have a brief slideshow. It's not a presentation per se, but it offers a summary of the modifications to the community development budget, and I think it will install some brevity into tonight's meeting, as our budget is fairly simple, in my opinion, but I'll leave that to all of you to determine by the end of this evening's proceedings. I'm joined this evening by the managers within the Community Development Division. I'll let them all introduce themselves when they get up and talk about their budget, but I'll just quickly provide an overview because these are really the folks that do the day-to-day work of the Community Development Division. They and their teams are really the critical pieces of what we do on a day-to-day basis. So we have Sam Durfee, the Planning Manager, Camille Correa, the Transit Administrator, Bill McKinney, the Building Safety Manager, Nelson Ortega with Code Enforcement, and Deb Chisholm, our Sustainability Manager. And I just want to, again, thank them for all of their work and all of their team's work to get this budget together, and certainly for their work over the last year and their work that will come over the coming year. I wanted to take just a brief moment to provide an overview of where we stand from a percentage increase perspective. We've obviously been aware of the prior budget review committee meetings. I've been following closely to have a better understanding of what questions may arise this evening. So I wanted to address a few of those perhaps as part of my overview comments. And the first being that from a percentage increase perspective, overall, inclusive of benefits, community development is presenting a 3.4% budget increase, which is obviously above the guideline of 3%. Excluding benefits, community development is presenting a 2.81% budget, which of course is compliant with the guideline that was presented by the mayor. I'm sure it will come as no surprise to each of the Budget Review Committee members that our primary drivers for expense increases are almost exclusively salaries and benefits. And we're happy to talk about those this evening in broad strokes, but of course those are non-discretionary items that are contractually obligated, and so there's only a certain level of detail to which we can speak to those. I'll say very generally, and we're happy to get into this as we address each of our budgets, our discretionary line items are either completely stable from the fiscal 25 budget or have actually been reduced moving into the 2026 budget. We were very cognizant, based on the multiple meetings of the Budget Review Committee and the Board of Aldermen, that this guideline was critical to comply with, and certainly based on the mayor's guidance, we've done our best effort to do that. I do expect that throughout tonight's proceedings there will be some questions about what items may have been cut or what items we may have wanted to include, given a more permissive guideline. Our managers are happy to answer those questions, but again, I want to be clear that we respect and worked very diligently to meet the guideline that was put in front of us. A few other items of note before we jump into our departmental presentations, I think I'm actually up first this evening, is that we currently have 3 open positions across the division, and it's a division of approximately 40 staffers. We have 2 open positions within the Urban Programs Department and 1 open position within the Building Safety Department, and a quasi-open position within the Code Enforcement Department that we can talk more about tonight. This is actually a significant amount of progress for us. I was actually looking back at our notes from last year, and we were at 7 open positions with 1 in all of our departments last year. And so we've had significant progress bringing people on board, doing that through job description modifications, very boots-on-the-ground efforts to recruit new talent, and I think generally just working to improve our workplace culture, which I'm really, really proud of. And so we're happy to be at a much more fully staffed level, but certainly we do have needs, and so although not part of this budget, certainly we're constantly auditing ourselves and looking for areas of opportunity to expand our services and our personnel groupings moving forward, but that's not part of our fiscal 26 proposal. I'll always note, or I note as I always do, that urban programs is not being presented this evening as it's exclusively grant funded, it's HUD funded, whether through our lead program, our CDBG, or our home funds. But I would be remiss if I didn't take an opportunity to quickly acknowledge something that impacts urban programs, and certainly Camille and her team in the transit department. Federal funding is an unprecedented unknown right now for our division. We have seen, I think, fairly open communication with the federal government that indicates that we won't see significant changes to service in fiscal 2026, but there are some very scary unknowns out there. One of which we learned on Monday is that the President's discretionary budget proposal includes a complete elimination of the CDBG and home programs. When that would take effect, whether that effort will be successful, we simply do not know. But I bring this up simply to say that if you do have questions this evening about federal funding, we can give you a hypothesis, we can give you a prediction, but our crystal ball is very limited. And so it's difficult to say what exactly will happen. And we frankly are proceeding under with the expectation that those funds will still be available to us moving into the next fiscal year. So I just wanted to put that out there. I also want to quickly note, and this particularly pertains to transit, it's not just the federal funding that's particularly challenging for us right now. As you're all aware, there are significant revenue gaps at the state level. We do receive state pass-through monies. That includes our transit department. We are not clear on what level of funding we will receive from the state of New Hampshire, and I know this impacts Director Bagley as well. But we are proceeding under the expectation that we will receive some monies, but we're also planning for the event that we don't. And so while you'll see a 3% request from Ms. Correa this evening, there are some unknowns as we head into next fiscal year, and it's possible we could be coming back to the Board of Aldermen to have future funding conversations moving forward. So we don't know everything, but we know a bit this evening. And then finally, before I jump into my department, I just wanted to again acknowledge that it's not just the managers here that get us to this point, it's all the team members in community development, but it's also our city multidisciplinary team, all the way from John Griffin to Dawn Enright to Megan Karen to Tim Cummings. But one person that I realized I didn't mention last year is Janet Graziano, our finance manager, who works incredibly hard to get us to this point. In fact, she's actually the one that does my job, and I just don't want to tell anybody. But she is incredible, and she's done a lot of the work to get us to this point and given us guidance to meet this guideline. So I want to acknowledge her efforts in preparing this year's fiscal budget. With that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to offer other overview comments, but I'm also happy to jump right into the community development budget and provide an overview of what we're proposing there.
Okay, the first department's 181, community development. Appropriations are on page 107.
Mr. Chair, whenever you're ready, I'm happy to jump in with a summary.
Go ahead.
The modifications within community development, like you'll hear from many of the departments this evening, are very limited. But what is important to point out is the community development budget is a huge part of how we worked to meet the guideline overall. And specifically what I'm referring to is that the community development budget is actually down by 4.5% in the proposed budget. And we accomplished that really in two ways. One, by reducing our contracted services line by $5,000, and I'll talk about that in just a minute, what we do with that line item. But more critically, by actually doing a partial pause of the neighborhood improvements line, which has actually historically been referred to as Your Voice, Your Choice. And Alderman Lopez is well aware of this program, and I think has felt some of the impacts of our challenges with deploying these monies. Currently, we have monies already set aside in the current fiscal year budget, and some money is actually set aside in escrow accounts that we have actively put out to bid for construction of the Reverend Dr. Perkins Los Amigos Park. We also are preparing to do a Your Voice, Your Choice participatory budgeting exercise in the Crown Hill section of the city. We are comfortable with doing a reduction in this line item as we catch up on our work that has to be done, and particularly complete the work that's needed in the Tree Streets area. And so this seemed like an appropriate area to reduce operating budget ask. I want to be very transparent, though, because you're going to be hearing about at a future Human Affairs Committee meeting, I am proposing to get these $30,000 back as part of a CDBG request, therefore fully funding the program moving into the next year. But again, it's a very well-aligned program to our community development block grant because it's aimed at benefiting low to moderate income individuals. I think it fits well within that programmatic requirement, but it is certainly an area that we can reduce within our operating budget, and therefore I've included that reduction here. Speaking quickly to contracted services, this is a critical line for us. You can see that in past years we've budgeted $25,000. I've adjusted this down to $20,000. This is an absolute rainy day fund, but it gets used. I use this for appraisals of certain properties that the city is looking to sell. I use this to conduct reviews of financials associated with development proposals when we're forming master development agreements. I've used this to pay for locks at the warming station. It really is, it runs the gamut as far as what we've used these monies for, and it's a $20,000 line in the proposed budget. If you ask me specifically what I will commit to spending next year, I can't do that because of the nature of the line, but I can promise you that the monies will be spent. And so I'm deeply committed to seeking this amount of money from the Budget Review Committee and as part of the budget process, but again, willing to reduce it moving forward. Exclusive of those two modifications, the budget remains stable. There are really no other modifications to speak of here. Obviously, it's impacted by salaries, wages, and benefits, but I'm happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
Any questions for Director Sullivan? I'm going to call on Alderman Senate.
I knew you knew it.
Not too bad.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In regard to the reduction that you made in the neighborhood improvements line, the Your Voice, Your Choice in particular, just so I'm clear on that, it's my understanding that you sort of have a backlog of work to be done over in Ward 4 in the Tree Streets at the Los Amigos Park, which that's fine. You and I have talked about the introduction of this that you'd like to do in the Crown Hill neighborhood. You know I'm very supportive of that. This reduction, does that put a pause on that for the time being, or is it your intention to ideally be able to move forward with it by seeking those CDBG funds?
Yes,
Mr. Chair.
Director Sullivan.
That's a great question, Alderman Senate, and to your comment about Tree Streets, I know Alderman Lopez is deeply passionate about that project, so that's our first priority. But to your question, no, there will be no impacts. And the reason for that is we actually have enough accumulated funding to kick off the Crown Hill project no matter what. What our risk is that we, rather than asking the community what they want to do with $70,000 or $100,000 rather, we may be asking them what they'd like to do with $70,000. So the size of the improvement will be reduced. I don't want to use tonight as a lobbying exercise for CDBG funds, but I truly think that this project is a good fit for those. It wouldn't be the first time CDBG monies were actually used for the futsal court when it was first constructed in Alderman Lopez's ward. So I am banking a bit on the ability to secure some of that funding, but even in the event that we don't, we have two things. One, we have money available to us now, and we often have prior year CDBG monies that can be reallocated. And so we have an additional pot of funds that we could tap into if necessary. So I'm fairly confident in the ability to mobilize $100,000 in the Crown Hill neighborhood to do improvements.
Very cool, thank you.
All set?
Yep.
Did you have your hand up?
I did not.
Okay. Alderman Lopez.
So for context, Reverend Dr. Perkins Los Amigos Park has been many years in the making, and we engaged the people of the Tree Streets. We presented to them your choice, your voice, and the first idea they came up with was the futsal court, probably one of the best ideas we've seen in new ideas and new use of space, because they took what was essentially a vacant lot and turned it into a very actively used and economic activity field. So they did a great job with that one. Then we did the next one. And so I'm particularly passionate about this, not just because I'm obsessed with the Tree Streets. There's other areas in my ward that do also, merit attention. But this was a demonstration model and stated as such by the city that we're going to reach into the communities that don't have the same opportunities, and we're going to show them that their choice matters. So 4 years later, they're starting to wonder if we're serious. And, in the future, if we're going to do these programs, we need to make sure that we're able to, execute reasonably effectively. Now, I know a lot of stuff happened. I mean, COVID and stuff like that. So, and while the communication and updates haven't been timely particularly, I think the community is aware that there is still effort being made to complete that project. So it's not that I'm focused on that particular park. I think the your choice, your voice concept only works if we actually are able to deliver on it. And that means we do have to put it as a priority, because while treated as a silo, this is a difficult, complicated $30,000 versus $60,000 conversation. We all know when we're looking at budgetary items, there's a lot more of that is just tossed around idly. I think some of my colleagues remember sort of off-the-cuff statement made by a city official a couple of weeks ago. Well, we might need to do a feasibility study. I'd say just $30,000, something easy. And it's like, that means a lot in other programs. So that's where I focus particularly on things like this, because we shouldn't be missing them. Now, all that being said, my question to Director Sullivan is, CDBG's always competitive. There's usually 200% of the budget proposed, and that's after the city's interviewed and winnowed and kind of made sure that organizations are aware of what the restrictions are, what the criteria are, whether they're really going to get it. Like, it comes to the Human Affairs Committee pre-vetted, and it's still usually twice what we can actually do. And several aldermen here are on the Human Affairs Committee and can attest to the fact, and President Wilshire, of course, that it takes a lot of discernment to make that happen. So this year, if we move this over to CDBG, isn't that on the chopping block in the Trump administration's funding? Are we likely to get less, if anything? And then now we're kind of like, oh, well, we moved this over there, and it was a shrinking iceberg.
Director Sullivan?
It's a great question. I do not have the same level of concern about the upcoming year entitlement of CDBG funds, Alderman Lopez, because that was part of an existing continuing resolution that was passed. And so I don't have the level of concern about this year. It's really next year that I have grave concerns about. That said, as we've seen over the last 3 months, anything can change at any point in time. And so as much as I'm confident, I'm not ignorant either. So I do think that CDBG funds could be a risk. I think it comes back to the answer to Alderman Senate that even in the event that those CDBG monies are no longer available, we have prior year CDBG funds that would be available. Those have already been allocated to the city and are sitting in reserve. And the project can still happen without CDBG funding. It just would be a wonderful supplement to increase the allowable funds and budget for a project in Crown Hill. So again, this reduction of $30,000 and shifting that $30,000 to the CDBG process, I admit it's fully at risk, but I am confident in our ability to deploy the program without those monies available. I will say, because you give me an opportunity, it is actually a much less competitive year for CDBG applications that you're going to learn about this on Monday, Alderman Lopez. We're going to issue a memo as part of the packet. For some reason, we are down in our CDBG requests, and I think there are a couple factors there. Part of it being there's an acknowledgement by the nonprofits that these funds are volatile and unpredictable, so I think they're taking less risk in applying for them. And beyond that, there are fewer city projects and fewer projects generally. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but we have fewer requests, and I am actually fairly confident we will be able to fund a large portion of the projects that were submitted.
I mean, you didn't change the voicemail or anything, right? Like, they can
No.
still just call, okay.
No,
Then, I
we
mean-
were worried about that, actually. I have to admit, we were like, why are people not reaching out? But they're still good applications. It's just a lower volume than prior years.
Okay, well, I trust your integrity, and I had no questions about that. If there's any concerns, people will show up in public comment. I just want to make sure that it's said that it's a risk moving things over to CDBG when that's federal funding, and, you know, when the alderman over here, who constantly votes against federal funding, might have known we were putting ourselves as dependent on a very volatile situation, where the rest of us were just like, oh, no, they're always good for it. So I just want it to be known, especially since CDBG, I mean, Your Choice, Your Voice is moving into a new community. I would like them to have a great experience with it.
Any other questions? Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with this because I think right now in this world, I mean, we're going to have to start being careful. But before I forget, you had mentioned something in your opening comments I just wanted to be clear on, because I think every single department that's come before us has said the exact same thing. Salaries and benefits, we can't do anything about. You can always, and I'm not an advocate for this, you could always have less staff. And so, again, I am not advocating for that, but what we'll get for blowback from the community is, oh, they say you can't do anything about it. Of course they could. They could reduce their staff, because I think the former candidate for mayor who lost was saying he would cut City Hall by like 50% or something crazy. So you can always do that. I just want to make sure that's clear to people that when we say stuff like, you know, nothing can be done, that sounds very like definite, and there's always something. We could not hire a position that's open, something like that. I look at the CDBG stuff, and if it's going to possibly go away, do we need that manager, right? Or do we need that position? I don't know. I mean, that's just rhetorical, but I'm just saying that I just want to make sure that, and again, you're not the only one to say that. And I think it's because everybody phrases their budget as, well, I only gave you 2.8%.
Yeah.
Well, but with salary and benefits, 3.4, well, we can't do anything with that part. So, but we're fine with 2.8. We went under what the mayor said. Well, what the mayor wanted, or what we wanted as a budget committee, is 3% with benefits and salary. So, you know, that's the difference, I think, there. So I just want to make sure, and again, I'm not advocating for you to go back and cut any staff. I am not an advocate for cutting staff that's currently in their positions now. I've said that many times, so, but I just want to make sure that's clear to everybody out there.
If I could just respond, you know, I'm happy to resign tonight. I think we could cut some significant funding.
Just cut your salary.
That's fine. Yeah, no, honestly, I love this so much. I'll work for free. But I think,
What was that?
I think it's a fair point, and I think the assumption that I make when I make that kind of comment, you're well aware of this, is that we have the expectation that service level will be maintained. And so I'll be honest, you know, Alderman Lopez and I have had exchange for years about Your Voice, Your Choice. We've been down 2 staff in urban programs and 3 at times for years. It's been a very challenging time. And so if you want to see a direct impact of the inability, or direct impact of staff shortage, and you can ask Ms. Correa about this as well, services will simply not stay the same because people cannot work 80 hours a week. And so to your point, yes, we can absolutely reduce staff as long as everyone is comfortable with the corresponding reduction in services. And you aren't all comfortable with that. I know you love the programs that we have. You love all the services that we offer. They're critical to you. So that's the assumption I make when I make that comment.
Follow up,
Yeah,
Alderman
just to
Tebow?
follow up. So that's exactly, that's what I want from an explanation there, because I asked the question of Chief Rourke, right? Because people always say, well, why do you get overtime? And why don't you cross-train firemen? Why don't you just cross-train everybody in City Hall? You know, Nelson can do the same thing as Deb, can do the same thing as Sam, anybody, right? So we hear those questions. But that's the answer I want, right? What will happen if we don't, A, hire those people or keep the people we have to the services the community gets, right? And police, it's a big one, because if you don't have the police, right, then the city becomes less safe, right? And you got departments here that if you don't have, certain things will happen. So I think that's just the explanation we need for the people of the city to understand that you want services, whether it's public works or whatnot, and if we don't have enough staff, all of a sudden you're gonna be calling City Hall every day saying, why isn't my pothole filled, or, you know, why did this happen, or why can't I get this license quicker, or whatnot, so.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So, Alderman Sullivan, by the way, if you have a question, just speak up, because we can't see you with the presentation up on the screen, so.
Okay,
So if you raise your hand, I can't tell, so just speak up.
okay. I didn't want to speak out of order. Just to dovetail off of that question, Director Sullivan, you mentioned, I think it was in the first bullet point of your slide, that there was a $20,000 reduction in benefits. I had gone through each department and I didn't see that. So I'm wondering if you could please clarify that bullet point on your presentation, if you don't mind.
Director Sullivan?
Certainly, that's poor slide construction on my part, Alderman Sullivan. That overall decrease of 4.5, so it's an overall decrease of 4.5 on the budget that includes benefits. It does not mean that there's a $20,000 reduction in benefits. There's a $20,000 reduction overall in the budget, in my budget alone. Community Development Department alone.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Got it. Because I saw the development division.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
That's double poor slide construction on my part. Yep.
Could I ask a follow-up?
Sure, a
please?
follow-up, go ahead.
Thank you. Around the CDBG discussion, and Director Sullivan, you had mentioned that there were fewer requests. Does the local charitable gaming situation that has really grown in the city, does that have anything to do with that? Or is that just completely unrelated?
There absolutely is a relationship. I can't, there's no, it's a classic correlation causation kind of question, but no, I think it is a real contributor. Those monies are much more easily accessible. I heard Alderman Lopez say it out of my corner here, and
It's like $250,000 to fill it.
it's absolutely right. There's no public process. There aren't the requirements to do Davis-Bacon wages that come with CDBG monies. I think that's absolutely the case. And that combined with just the volatility of federal funding right now, I think those are both significant contributors to the lower volume of applications that we've seen.
Thank you.
All set. Yeah, in the paper today, the new Nash Casino, and since they've been open, have donated $1.5 million to charities here in the area, so in Nashville, because they can't do Massachusetts. So that's significant. Alderman Kelly?
Just two comments to the conversation. We were talking about salaries, and I just wanted to flag that the reduction in services is a point, but the other thing that we talk about a lot in personnel is how we have to be competitive with surrounding communities, and we are right on the border of Massachusetts. So our salaries have to be competitive enough to keep great talent here in Nashua, and we've talked through that. We actually just did a whole study around what does it look like, what does surrounding cities look like, and how do we continue to get those services with exceptional talent. So just wanted to make that point as well. We are not in the middle of the state. We oftentimes are losing people to Massachusetts, et cetera. So just want to make that point. And then my only other thought process with the lower CDBG is it has been an extremely volatile 3 months, and some nonprofits are trying to figure out how to stay in business and in service. So maybe CDBG wasn't top of their list.
Any other questions? Also, just for the record, we don't discuss benefits because benefits were set by other legislation earlier in the process. So the only way benefits get impacted is by staff or salaries. So that's why we discuss staffing and salaries and not benefits, because benefits are generated based on that. The benefit percentages and everything are set. The other thing is, when you do appraisals, do you do them at any time on properties that we're selling?
That's primarily when we do them.
So when we're selling properties and money comes into the city, why is it that your money spent on appraisals doesn't come back to you?
Ooh, you're giving me, because I'm just very generous. It's just, no, I mean, all departments and divisions provide general services for the city and pay for certain expenses that ultimately are not directed back to them. It's based on their expertise and their role in the process. And so while I would love for the disposition of property and the sale of city property to flow back to the division, I recognize that generally the sale of city property should likely result in a contribution to the general fund and not to the division.
Understand that, but if that particular line in your budget gets down to near zero, and they still have additional things to do, I think you would be valid to go back to, and it may require transfer of funds coming through the Board of Aldermen, but I think that would be a valid exercise since we've sold property, money's come into the city, which goes into the general fund, and if you need that account replenished, that would make sense.
It would. What I want to be really clear about is that this is not the only account in the city from which appraisals are paid for. So often what will happen is a collaborative conversation between community development, economic development, administrative services, in some cases public works, based on what's being acquired and for what purpose. And we will literally, as a group, decide who is going to commission and pay for a given appraisal. And so it's very much a group exercise, quite honestly, based on who has funding available. So I plan for 1 to 2 appraisals out of my budget on an annual basis. Depends on the size, the number of properties. But we divide and conquer, essentially, Alderman Dad. We do pay for appraisals out of other accounts in other divisions as well.
My only point was that if we have additional appraisals to do, and all of a sudden we don't have money to do it, that would not make sense. The money needs to be put back in the account so the appraisal can be done, no matter whose account it falls under.
And I think that's why generally when disposition of property happens, we sometimes will look for legislation that will direct those monies or a portion of those monies back to a certain place, because there are very real expenses associated with disposition. And it's not necessarily appropriate for the departments to eat those costs in all cases. So we do that sometimes.
Okay, so if we're done with community development, we'll move on to building safety, Department 181. And that's revenues are on page 36 and appropriations are on page 104. So who's doing building safety?
Thank you, Chairman Dowd. I'm Bill McKinney. I'm the manager for the Department of Building Safety. For fiscal year '26, we proposed a budget of $970,032. That is specific to our department, a 5% increase over last year. Our most significant increases, again, as you've heard before, are contractual agreements between related to salaries and benefits. The Department of Building Safety remains quite busy, working with our developers in our community, our municipal departments, conducting plan review, permitting, and inspections. However, we are starting to see activity level off to a point. Whereas in this year here, we would see that we probably are going to be very close to last year's numbers on permitting that's being issued, and the same with inspections. I am pleased to announce that, as we've done in the past few years, it looks like our revenues are going to exceed our expenses for the department again. We try and balance that as close as we is. Our permit fees are not supposed to be a money-making adventure for the city, but they are supposed to cover the costs of our operations for the department. And currently, right now, we're about $99,000 over our expenses as far as revenues. Staffing, I would say this is an interesting question, as we heard the conversation earlier, is that I think that staffing for our department right now is adequate for the requests of services that we receive. I'm pleased to announce that we welcome back Don Michaud as our building inspector assistant plans examiner in FY25. We needed to replace our electrical inspector, Russ Markham, who retired after 20 years of service to our department, and we were able to bring in a qualified candidate for that position. We replaced one permit technician in 2025. We did fill our part-time permit technician that was approved in FY25, and that position has been very useful to clearing up a large backlog of permit and applications that were at the front counter. And I'm really, really pleased to announce that we were able to welcome back Christine Jean, who had left the department just about a year and a half earlier, back to that position. I do want to take a moment and just thank several of our long-term members. That we have 3 members with over 20 years of service to our department and 2 with over 10 years of service. So I think it shows that the type of people we attract, they're long-term, and I really appreciate all of their efforts for our department. In fiscal year '25, we also went through the implementation of the state-adopted 2021 editions of the international codes and NFPA fire codes. In FY26, and we're going to be looking at an extensive review of our revised ordinances for the building codes, and that's due to several pending legislative bills that are making their way through Concord right now. It could have some severe impacts on what our revised ordinances look like and as far as how we adopt and administer the codes in the state. And again, we'll maintain with our fiscal year 2026 of keeping up with the digital codes. We're moving further and further away from the hard copy paper codes and going to digital. It makes those codes much more, it's more cost effective in our view, but it also makes those codes available to our inspectors 24/7. They can search, they can access more standards than we can afford in our budget doing that process. So it's really a cost savings for us to do that. And I will state that as far as staffing in FY26, sadly, we just had the recent resignation of one of our permit technicians who did leave the position seeking higher pay. And with that, I will welcome any questions.
Questions for Mr. McKinney? Alderwoman Kelly?
Thank you. I appreciated your comments around your revenue and trying to really balance that. So my question is, I know that the city is very much focused on making sure that we're bringing more housing, more buildings in. Are you accounting for that in your staffing, and are you seeing more pipeline as we continue to push, especially in the affordable housing section? We've got a lot of big projects that we're trying to push there.
Yes, we communicate, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
We communicate regularly with the planning department as far as what they're seeing coming down the line. We were very active in the committees that review a lot of the projects, so that we do take into account any of the projects that are coming in as far as when we look at our budgeting numbers and our staffing numbers. And as I would state again, is that our staffing numbers are adequate for the workload that we have now. If we see more increases, then we would absolutely have to come back and look at whether we go to staffing or we outsource.
Okay. Follow up?
That's it? Follow up?
My second question, I know that we're currently working on our code as a city. Do you see that affecting you in the next budget year?
The code as far as planning and zoning, I don't see that impacting much of what we would do. Again, we're communicating closely. There's some ideas in that project that I think are interest as far as affordable housing, and some ideas that Sam Durfee and I have talked about, some programs for housing that may be able to be included in that would have standard models that we've already pre-approved to help expedite permitting.
Perfect. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
All set. Any other questions?
Well, Chairman Dowd,
Yes, go ahead, Alderman Sullivan.
thank you very much. My question is around the nearly 4,300 building permits that were issued. Are you able to discern how many of those building permits were brand-new construction?
We could, I do not have that number with me tonight, but I can certainly provide that.
I appreciate it. Could I have a follow-up, too?
Follow up, go ahead.
This is more of maybe a process question, but we have about, in Ward 9 off of Ridge Road, we have about, I'm going to just say 85, round number, of condos that are being constructed currently. If I were the developer, is that 85 different permits, or is it just one permit for the entire development? That's just a FYI question.
If it's a multi-unit building, being a single structure that contains multiple units in it, that would be a single permit. But if it's individual buildings themselves, because they are assigned specific lot numbers, they would need to be individual permits.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
Alderman Lopez.
If this was a large building that had a different purpose and suddenly, say, a big 3/4 of it were turned into housing and then maybe like a theater-sized piece, would that be multiple permits or just one permit?
You would, if it's renovation of the theater piece, that would be its own separate permit. The residential would be separate permits.
Okay, just check. I know the fire department is where that came
Just,
from, but.
just for the record, I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to, but the city does not charge themselves for permits.
Okay, but they might charge a developer that we gave.
Yeah, well, it's more complex. Any other questions? So I just want to take this opportunity to thank Mr. McKinney and his staff. Been involved with numerous school projects, as have some of the members here that are on the Joint Special School Building Committee. And you've provided outstanding service and timely service, which is strictly very important because of our timing on schools with trying to do work when students aren't there, and also for funding-wise. So thank you very much for all your support. You've been outstanding. Thank you.
And thank you for your support as well.
Okay, if there's nothing remaining on building safety, we'll go to 155, code enforcement, which is revenues on page 37, appropriations on page 105.
Good evening, this is Nelson Ortega, the Code Enforcement Manager. Our budget, our department is the smallest of them all within the division, and our increases, our budget is mainly our salaries and benefits. For us, everything else is just plateaued, other than the increase in salaries and benefits. So if anyone has any questions, I can try to answer some.
Questions? Yes, Alderman Senate?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see your full-time wages going down and then an increase in part-time wages. Is that a staffing approach adjustment with maybe a full-time inspector going part-time, or?
No, you want to take this?
I can take it if you'd like me to. So,
Director Sullivan?
thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back a bit, Alderman Senate, we used to have a position within the Code Enforcement Department that was actually joint funded by the Code Enforcement Department, general funds, and by the lead program through HUD funds. We had for a long time anticipated filling that position. Well, when we received our new lead grant, we realized that we were not able to float or cover the other half of the position with the lead grant for a variety of different reasons, namely the cost of rehabilitating lead paint units. So what we've done here is actually taken this out as a full-time. It was in the full-time salaries. The half position was in the full-time. We've moved it to be a part-time position, recognizing that it's only going to be a 0.5 full-time equivalent employee moving forward. Does that make sense? So it's been removed as a full-time salary and moved into the part-time, but it's the same position as before.
And you don't anticipate that that would be a reduction in services offered?
Well, that's a great question. If you were to ask us this evening if there was anything that we wish had been included that, we did not include, Ms. Ortega and I have discussed the idea of moving this to a full-time position. We're in a complaint-based department, and that's a challenge, certainly for the code enforcement team. But we're also, again, trying to be cognizant of the guideline. And so we had ambition to move this to a full-time position, fully general funded, but that just wasn't in the cards for us this year.
Follow-up?
Follow-up, Alderman Senate?
In a perfect world, what would the total budget impact of that full-time position be? Rough estimate.
Director Sullivan?
I'm hesitant to say, but I'd be happy to send a follow-up email to the committee. There's a whole lot of factors, benefits-wise and pay-wise, that I just simply wouldn't be able to speak to. I think what would be fair to say is it would be certainly a doubling of the amount that you see in the part-time wages, and there'd be the addition of benefits as well.
Right.
So it's let's say a $50,000 cost. But I want to be clear, we're not advocating for that amendment, but certainly it's something that we do think we need to be fully resourced moving forward.
Thank you.
Yes, by the way, two things. One, if there are any additional information that has to come back to the committee, please send it to Donna Graham so she can distribute it to the full board. Okay, Alderman Senate. Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that position, looking at your whole budget for your whole department, would that 50,000 be the first thing that you advocate for needing in it? If you had your own way, would that be the first place you go to say, hey, I need 50,000, I need it for this? Or are there other things you did not get that you prefer that money to go to?
Director Sullivan?
Well, Alderman Tebow, you're setting me up to make enemies with my managers, I think. So I think I really am hesitant to answer that question. I would say generally the two needs that we have, I'm going to dodge this a little bit, but the two needs that we have most are in our transit department and the general fund allocation to transit and within the code enforcement department. Those are the two significant things that are quite reserved within the budget that we didn't come forward with, I think, what our full ask would be. They're both equally critical needs. One is just, with transit, it's an unknown. We may not need the funding. We'd always like more funding. With code, certainly we have a need to provide additional services moving forward. The number of properties is not going down across the city. And the idea that we've been stable staffed in that department for a very, very long time, that will need to change over the coming years. It will have to.
Follow-up, Alderman Tebow?
Thank you. And the reason I ask this, right, so every department's coming here with something they probably didn't get or probably something they want. And so I know we're all either putting amendments in to slash things or to add things, right? Or to change things, right? Transfer this money to this money. And, I mean, I'll put it out there, right? So Alderman Senate's been not shy to say that, he's asked questions about consulting in different areas of things. So if I was going into his mind, he'd probably say, take some consulting, put it towards these other things. I'm trying to figure out what those things are that are more important than maybe these things over here. So last week we met with fire, and they were talking about this 89,000 they didn't put in the budget that would go to their leadership because they don't get paid by contract like their firemen do, and that they haven't been paid, so in a way where people want to do those leadership positions. So I'm always trying to think, is what is the most important things to the city that is not in here that we have to advocate for, and what things we think are not that important that we can take out. Now, you're going to think every single thing that's in here is important, because you put it in here. And so will every other department. But then when we try to make those amendments, I want to make sure I'm voting on the amendment that's the most important to keep, or to add, or the least important to subtract, right? So that's why I asked you the question. And so at least you gave us the two things that you're looking for if we were to make those amendments. So thank you, I appreciate that. Of course.
By the way, as we get towards the wrap-up session, if you have specific changes you want in the budget, I suggest that you talk with Don Enright and get the exact numbers and dollars. And by the way, this isn't like the Board of Education where it's only bottom line, add or subtract. If you make a motion to take the half-time inspector and make him full-time, that's what they will do. It's not like you give them 50K and they decide where they want to spend it. They would have to adjust that via other legislation, all right?
I was here last year. I got it.
It wasn't just for you.
Oh, okay.
All right. Any other questions?
Actually, I do.
Yeah, Alderwoman Kelly?
You mentioned two wish lists. I think we heard that the position was about a $50,000 position, shared two. What was the price tag of the other wish list item?
I would prefer to send that number to you all after this meeting.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
9 a.m.?
All right.
11 p.m.
We're all set with code enforcement. We'll go to Department 185, sustainability. Appropriations are on page 110.
prepared for hydro, which is 170. Sorry, thought we were going in order. Hi, Deb Chisholm, Sustainability Department Manager. We are the ones that are the smallest department in the division.
Or 2 people.
We're small but mighty. Yes, we have 3 people in our department, and we'd like to keep 3 people in our department. Not a whole lot of changes going on our budget between last year and this year. I will, since everybody seems to be talking about it, I will give you the detail on my other contracted services. I did include a picture on my slide which shows the boat, the fan boat that is used on the Nashua River and the canal when doing the aquatic invasive species management. So that is really the chunk of the budget really is planning for the annual application of that herbicide. So we have to hire a contractor to do that, not something that we have the ability to do internally. Really, the only other item in my budget that's a little bit larger is we've got consulting services. They typically, that money goes to KLA, which is the company that does the Livable Nashua dashboard that tracks all of the sustainability plan work that we're doing in our department. But other than that, everything is trying to keep everything on the low side, so I'm open to questions.
Questions? Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll start off with the consultant stuff. So this is going to probably go towards Matt because it's going to be general to your whole department because you use consulting probably in multiple areas along with people from other departments, other heads. How important are consulting services in general?
Very for
Sullivan?
me.
Yeah, I mean.
And in what
I'll
way?
let Ms.
Like,
Chisholm
why
answer.
are they so important? The reason I ask this question,
What's the gravity of the
I understand to a certain extent, but people out there think sending money to consulting services is wasted money. That's what people think. I'm not saying I think that. So I want it kind of explained a little bit, what the importance of using a consultant is to, city staff that's already getting paid according to people out there to do this stuff, right?
Let me count the ways. So I mean, there are a variety of factors, right? Expertise is one that I think we need to acknowledge. In some cases, we bring on consultants for appraisals, for planning documents that we may not have expertise with. We use consultants for those types of services all the time, and it's not just about time and the ability of city staff and capacity, it's about expertise. And the reality is that we can literally spend more time as city staff, even if we have that expertise, to complete the same process because we cannot fully dedicate our efforts to doing the work. That's a reality. The other piece is certainly we are happy to staff up more fully so that we never have to hire a consultant again. My budget ask is a 300% increase. And none of you want that, right? And that's not fair. And the reality is that consultants are not needed for everything. We actually have very limited consulting in our budget, the largest of which is really the support services to the hydroelectric facilities that Deb will talk about in a few minutes. We do not have the resources nor the expertise to provide those services. And frankly, for us to provide them would be far more costly because of the back-end infrastructure and administrative support we'd have to create. So there's so many things I could talk about, but we do deploy consultants across several of our departments. I think we do it on a pretty limited basis. We don't have like these kitchen sink things. The closest is my consulting services line. All the other ones are specifically programmed to very constructed work scopes. So I would advocate strongly for every single consulting line that we have. I'm happy to tell you exactly how we plan to use them or generally how we plan to use them, but they're essential to us doing our duties.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, typically consultants save money because if you had to have that same service like this river work, you'd have somebody come in that you only use part-time of the year and you have to have certain qualifications and licenses and permits. It wouldn't make sense to have that internally to the city. Other questions? Alderwoman Kelly.
Just a comment there. I think the points are well made. Obviously, sometimes expertise from outside is going to be less expensive than bringing them in-house. I will give just an acknowledgement to that other contracted services kind of feels very vague. And if someone's picking up the budget book and doesn't know all of that background, that's where we have to kind of like open up that black box of what's in there and how can we explain that to people, just so it feels transparent. I don't think that anyone's hiding anything, but it is one line item for all the things that you might be doing consulting-wise.
Alderman Senate?
Yeah, just to expand on that point a little more, I don't really raise concerns when I look at a previous year's consulting services budget at 82% through the end of March and at 92% through the end of March. Those aren't concerns to me.
Okay. Alderman Lopez?
Okay, so for context, before I ask Director Sullivan to make good on his promise there, how many consultants would you estimate if you were to give us an explanation, like in a memo, of which ones are doing what? And do you need a consultant to do that, or is it a small number?
Probably needs
I don't
think
want to have you waste the next few
I may
weeks.
be able to
If it's like
manage that
8,
myself.
then-
So let's take a moment, because I think this is important to the committee. So within the sustainability budget, to my knowledge, we employ what I'll say 3 contracts. So I'll include hydro in this. We generally have 3 consultants paid through operational budgets. We have Kim Lunder and Associates, we have Essex Hydropower, and we have our invasives treatment company. Within the hydroelectric section of the budget, we have consultants, within our hydroelectric capital projects, we bring on engineers and architects to design our fish passage, to design the upgrade to the Jackson Mills facility. We have a multitude of consultants, but that's on the capital budget side. In the planning department, we have a consultant working on our land use code that has a unique set of, a unique area of expertise and the capacity to provide those services. So that's another consultant. So we're up to 4 so far. Within community development, I've hired, I think, 3 to 4 consultants this year to assist with different projects. So we're up to 8, let's say. No consultants within code enforcement, no consultants within building safety, though in some cases, third-party inspection services are requested by the building safety department. And one of the primary purposes being to help the development review process move faster and more predictably, but those consultants are not hired by the city. So 0 consultants in building safety. Within the transportation department, if you treat our transit provider, TransDev, as a consultant, we have 1 consultant. They provide all of our operational services, our bus drivers, our dispatching services, and general administration for the bus service, outside of the strategic work that Camille and her team do. So that's an additional consultant. So we're up to about 9. Beyond that, I believe that's all of the consultants that we have. We do not hire consultants for our urban programs department. We have about 10 consultants across the division. And that includes 3 to 4 that I hire for $2,500, $5,000, $10,000 tasks in community development.
So it wouldn't be odorous.
Follow up, Alderman Lopez?
Yes, if you don't mind. It wouldn't be odorous to say, give us a list of the ones that you have identified, so the full board has it, and we can say, okay, well, we need these, but maybe specify which ones we're using because it would take away from staff time, or some because, for example, the Jackson Falls consultant, I'm guessing we literally need somebody to do that evaluation because of professional expertise, or the water one.
If I may respond.
Yes, Director
absolutely.
Sullivan.
I have absolutely no objection to producing a memo that discusses the current contractual agreements that we have or have had over the last fiscal year with consultants. We are an absolute open book when it comes to that. And frankly, I think it would demonstrate why we use them, because it's a very small number for what we're actually doing. The only concern I would have, of course, is that somehow that list would constrain our ability to bring other types of consultants in the coming year. And I don't think that's what you're suggesting, Alderman Lopez. It's not at all, but, I want to justify the lines, but I also don't want to constrain us. So if that memo would help do that, happy to produce it.
Okay. All set, Alderman Lopez?
Yes, thanks.
Alderman Sullivan, you're all set?
All set.
Anyone else? All right, thank you very much. Now we'll move on to planning and zoning. Mr. Durfee with the revenues on page 39, appropriations on page 108. Talk about someplace that's fighting a moving target from what's going on in Concord.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Sam Durfee, Planning Manager for the City of Nashua. Yes, and thank you for that segue. We are tracking quite a few bills working their way through the legislature right now, some of which are very interesting. So we are keeping an eye on that, as they would have potential significant impacts to the way we operate and the way we administer land use development in the city. So we are showing an increase in our budget, just north of 5%, primarily due to salaries and benefit increases. We did trim in some of our discretionary lines to try and offset that. However, those lines represent such a small percent of the budget relative to salaries and benefits, so the offset is very hard to really make substantial. But we are on track to exceed our projected revenues for this year. And I think that something to note about that is that we have an opportunity coming up with the adoption of the new land use code to review our fee structures. With a change in how we regulate land development, we may find that our current fee structures do not accurately reflect how we account for changes in land use, the development of residential units or additional commercial square footage. So there's a great opportunity, I think, there to reevaluate. But looking around the southern part of the state, we're not far off from what other communities are charging for land development review fees, with flat application fees, but then also on per lot, per unit, per 1,000 square feet basis. We're just a little shy, so I think there is some room to grow in the revenue portion of the budget. But beyond that, we are now fully staffed, which has been a huge relief given the current level of work that we're shouldering right now. We were down a deputy for about 7 to 8 months from July of last year until this early spring. So we're feeling a little bit of a breathing room now, and which again is a huge relief with largely the land use code update, which is the biggest project that we have been dealing with for the past couple of years now, and it will be transformative for the city. And I will plug the upcoming PEDC meetings. Should you wish to tune in, we'll be taking deep dives into various sections of the land use code. But coming up soon, I believe we'll be releasing a first draft to the public of the code in May this month, fingers crossed. And then we'll begin a comprehensive public push where we'll be doing a lot of engagement in various styles, as we move towards the formal adoption process. But I'd be happy to take any questions regarding projects, budget, anything at all.
Questions on zoning? Alderman Senate?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Durfee, for the efforts that you've made in reducing some of your discretionary lines. One question I had in regard to that, just looking at your marketing outreach line where you've dropped that about $3,000.
Yes.
Not to put too fine a point on it, but you've got a pretty significant release coming up, like you just alluded to, and hopefully by the end of this month. Mm-hmm. Is that going to be adequate for communicating this rehaul of our code the way that you want to?
That's an excellent question, Alderman Senate. Thank you. We'd actually introduced that line item last year when we were beginning the first phase of public outreach, and that was including a lot of visioning, and then I think in the beginning of the code update, when you're introducing things and you're gaining input that helps to guide the process, there's a lot more time and legwork that goes along with that. Not to say that the phase that we're about to enter, where we have real things that we're going to talk about, that certainly does take time, but we learned through those initial efforts with the public, and I think we're dialing the budget accordingly. So I think there is opportunity to scale back, but I think we also will just be more effective in the deployment of those funds in meeting the public and doing the outreach.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Alderwoman Kelly?
I have two. I know that you alluded to some of the budget things that you're following and that they could impact you significantly. Can you just give us a little bit more clarity or?
Certainly. I will speak primarily to SB 84, which has some interesting language relative to minimum lot sizes and constrains the municipality's ability to require larger lot sizes. I believe it constrains down to about half-acre zoning. I think there are some allowances based on soils relative to septic design. Essentially, it could impact some of our more rural districts, if you could say that, our R40, our R30, and those would be forced to essentially be upzoned in the term of, lower lot sizes, smaller lot sizes. Not as substantial as a impact to a city like ourselves where we have very robust infrastructure services, but much more on some of the smaller towns potentially. But I think there's so many other bills in play right now with it's very hard to say what will pass, what will not, but a lot of times the combination of several together could be quite impactful, but it's still too early to say exactly how things will be playing out.
Thank you. And my follow-up is more of a statement. I think the recode is going to be incredibly important, and a lot of information will come out of that. I might request that President Wilshire do a special Board of Aldermen so that the whole board really gets to hear about this, because I think it's going to affect a lot of aspects of the city.
Other questions? Alderman Sullivan?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Durfee, you mentioned land use fees, and I was curious to know if you've done any forecasting or any such thing about what we could be getting for revenue from planning and zoning should we up those land use fees or whatever that is. Have you done any forecasting on that?
Thank you for the question, Alderman Sullivan. I haven't done anything that's too fine-grained because it's a little dangerous to do so. Generally, we see 2 to 3 really significant projects that come in every year with total application fees north of $50,000 or $60,000. It's hard to essentially, put your eggs in a couple of these very large baskets and assume that they're going to come in. But I mean, those are the trends we're seeing anyways. We're seeing fewer applications, but the ones that do come in are larger and carry more significant fees with them. Now, that said, should we increase some of our fees, and I also do want to just throw the caveat out there, if we change the way we're regulating, it's very hard, at the point where we are in the code to really put a fine point on how the change in the regulatory structure, coupled with an increase in fees, what that could generate in terms of additional revenue. There is revenue to be had there. There's no question. Whether that is, $20,000 on a year or $100,000, it's hard to say. I would hazard a guess that it's, maybe we'd be looking north of $30,000, but that's very, very back of the napkin, kind of off the cuff. But there's opportunity there for sure.
Other questions?
No, thank you.
Mr. Durfee, and are we actively pushing back on the state, especially since these things are all in the Senate right now, because I get information from the New Hampshire District Commission almost every day on what's going on in Concord, and as former chair of the zoning board, I'd like to strangle some of them. For instance, one of the bills that's going through up there is allowing an accessory dwelling on just about any size lot in the city. And one of the things it requires is doing an analysis of the sewer system to see if it can handle the additional flow. That might not indicate on one property, but if you take a street like Columbia Ave and you add another dwelling unit in each one of those properties, I'm pretty sure that can't handle it. Who's going to cover the cost of that analysis on the sewer system?
That's an excellent question. You've actually given me a great opportunity to plug some of the work with the land use code, where I am actively having conversations with various service sectors within the city to understand where our capacities are, where our excess capacity is, or where we're deficient in capacity, and then dialing, some of our, density regulations and really targeting areas for growth that can take it and dialing that back to areas that we cannot. And those are ongoing conversations with sewer, with roads, Panachuk water as well. But relative to that specific bill, obviously there are still provisions in the bill for your typical lot dimensional constraints, setbacks, lot area. If you just quite literally don't have the land to put the ADU on, you can't build it. But in terms of the broader analysis, there's work going on the city side to help inform that. I think we will need to take the time, if that bill does pass in the form as proposed, we would have to develop a system and an understanding of how we would go about conducting that analysis with wastewater and all the other departments that would be involved to understand, do we saddle the developer with the expense? How does that align with capital planning for infrastructure upgrades? There's so many questions that would need to be asked at that time, but we will be getting a better handle on that in the coming months.
Because my personal opinion is all the things that are going on in the current legislature up there, I've inquired, and I know the city is fighting back on some of them, but I wish that the Board of Aldermen had kept up to date on some of these, because I'm sure people would be shocked by some of these things that are being proposed. The other question I have is, if some of these things pass, is it going to affect your new document, and might you have to wait to release it if a lot of the things in it are going to have to be changed?
Well, that's a good question, Alderman Dowd. Well, fortunately, we actually took some time recently in all of these bills that touch planning and zoning. We actually did a little exercise with the department staff where every staff member was assigned 4 to 5 bills, do some research, kind of do that deep dive to understand what the potential impacts of the bills would be. We sat down around the table in 208, had a lunch, and then we all kind of presented. So we were able to get all these bills, a deeper level of understanding, and we understood where the priority bills, bills that were of chief concern to us. So while we have a better handle on the potential impacts of some of these bills, we're still obviously in process. The legislative process keeps on rolling. I think that a lot of these will run their course, whether they're signed into law or, inexpedient to legislate, or however they end up, at a point before we are ready to adopt the land use code. But that said, anytime, such a comprehensive land use document is adopted, there is going to be a period of time after adoption where we are out there, we're doing projects under the new code, and we find things that we have to fix. And, I hope that the board will be, gracious and have the understanding that when we do come forward with legislation seeking amendments to a newly adopted code, it's really just a period of growing pains, whether that's, based on things that have happened at the state legislature, or more that just we're learning and we're building and we're operating and adjusting, and we just need to make those changes as we move on.
Okay. Alderwoman Kelly?
I just wanted to applaud that approach to looking through the legislature and then also working through it together. That's wonderful. I would request that if you can share that with us, we also can go in and sign in for or against, or give some testimony as elected officials, especially if it's going to affect us here in Nashua. So would love to see it.
Yeah, the New Hampshire Municipal Association, I assume you get all those documents every day like I do. One hopes.
We do.
Oh, yes.
And they have the links to go and testify against. I'm just curious, from the mayor's office and from anyone else in the city government, why you haven't asked the Board of Aldermen to formally put a position forward on some of these things and saying, hey, you're crazy and we don't want that as a city. I know that they tried to pass legislation saying that anybody associated with the city couldn't testify in anything up there, but that failed, thank God. So does it make sense for, if one of those things is really egregious to what's going on here in Nashua, for the Board of Aldermen to take that position? I'd like to believe the mayor's already taken a position.
If I can,
Director Sullivan?
it is a complex position for city staff to be in, to recommend positions on bills at the state legislature. The first challenge is that often there's good intent behind the pieces of legislation that have been created, but in many cases, the language associated, the details, the devil's in the details do not actually effectively implement what the overall concept is. And so we often have internal conversations about the fact that, while legislation is well intended, it's imperfect in the way that it's been created. And so we're therefore hesitant to say, do not support this bill, because we may conceptually support the concept that's being proposed. The other challenge is, as you've said, it's not a simple thing for city staff to be lobbying at the state level when we may not have an articulated city position on an issue. Professional staff may have a position. Certainly Mr. McKinney, myself, Mr. Durfee, and others have been to the State House to testify on legislation, but we've only done that in situations on behalf of the city where there's a clear articulated position that the city has, and we don't have that on all these pieces of legislation. I'm not comfortable with city staff going to the State House and saying that we do not support the ADU bill. We don't have the authorization on behalf of the city to do that.
So I wasn't suggesting that you come in here and say, Board of Aldermen, vote against this and send it to the state. Come in and give us the legislation, give us your concerns, let the board make up their mind whether they want to do something. But, whether it's the mayor or the Board of Aldermen, these things, some of the things that are going on up there are serious impacts to the city of Nashua going forward. And I think that a formal position, the New Hampshire Municipal Association's taken pretty strong advocacy against some of these things. And, I just think that, if we just sit back and wait for this stuff to hit us in the face, and without saying something, it's probably not correct.
Alderman Dow, just to respond to that, and I certainly don't mean to suggest that there's not efforts that could be made to educate the board. I think there are. I think this is a conversation maybe we should take back to Megan Karen, the mayor's chief of staff. The mayor works hard to put together a legislative breakfast every year, and that's actually one of the occasions that we take advantage of to talk about our positions on these pieces of legislation. I will say, unfortunately, that happens relatively early in the process when the legislation hasn't gone through crossover. It's in its early form. We're responding often to incomplete bill text. We don't understand the full implications of a piece of legislation. But it sounds like perhaps, to the extent we could do this effectively, there should be some level of conversation around impactful bills that are at the state level with the Board of Aldermen. How we do that, I think I'd like to talk to Chief of Staff Karen about. But you're absolutely right. This year, particularly on the land use side, there are incredibly impactful pieces of legislation that Manager Durfee and his team are working to review. And I expect the same Director Bagley would say, and others. So that's noted. If you would be comfortable, I'll talk to Chief of Staff Karen about that.
Sure.
To define a
You could be our
process.
consultants.
Did you have something, Alderman O'Brien?
Yeah, just one point. After being a state representative for 16 years, past administrations have had a liaison that we would see occasionally, and would come up and express points of view from Nashua. And I don't know if that's still going on now.
If I could comment, so a couple things. One, the mayor's office does diligently track legislation, and we're having constant conversations with them. And the mayor's office does provide testimony in some cases. Mr. McKinney, Mr. Durfee, myself, others, we actively work through professional associations and other affiliations that we have to track legislation and weigh in, and those associations often take positions on bills. So we're very actively engaged. The thing I think that I'm hearing tonight that we could improve on is sharing that feedback with you all as the members of the board, and also I think developing a real process for doing not only that, but providing our professional expertise as part of committee meetings and other settings that might inform testimony in front of the legislature. I think that's heard on my part. Unfortunately, I know Megan Karen's watching this meeting at home because she's texting me about it. So certainly she's hearing this feedback as well. Sorry, Megan, if I'm giving up your what you're doing tonight, but she cares diligently about advocacy as well, and so certainly she and I can have a conversation about how we best do this.
Okay, great. Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the mayor actually was up in the Senate today testifying about something. I don't know what particularly, but I saw that he was up there. Taking a stance as the Board of Aldermen, I mean, we all have different viewpoints. So, you know, the person that doesn't like federal grants isn't going to be for federal grants, right? So, and vice versa, right? So, you know, for one, I don't think that necessarily helps us as a board. We all have state reps. We have 3 in each of our wards. Again, this is going to be an unfavorable opinion, but why can't we do our own work? Like, I don't understand why we're, you know, asking the city to provide stuff to us when we can go on, we can talk to our legislators and find that out ourselves. I don't know why we have to rely on other people to spoon feed us, but that's just, again, an unfavorable opinion, I'm sure. Probably because I'm more in tune with my state reps in my ward than maybe other people are. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think there are problems with any of our state reps. And
I wasn't blaming them.
And I think if we, as a board, had legislation to provide an input and we had a majority vote, it would take effect of the Board of Aldermen like every other piece of legislation that goes through, much like the Supreme Court. They don't agree on everything, but their rulings count. So are there any other questions for planning and zoning?
All right, we went off topic a little bit.
If not, I'd like to thank Mr. Durfee and for all the work he did on the new CIC process. It was a huge change from the way things were done. I think we still have a little fine tuning on it, but I think Alderman Sullivan would concur that it's a much more valid way to judge projects and places the city could look at spending money and things to get fixed. So I just want to congratulate him for the work that he went in. It was a lot of work too. I know it was, so thank you. All right.
And I do agree.
Yes, Alderman Sullivan, I knew you'd like to comment. Alderman Sullivan?
He said he agreed.
Oh, he agreed, okay.
I agreed with you.
Thank you. Next is 186, Transportation. Appropriations are on page 111.
Good evening, Camille Correa. Is it on? Good evening, Camille Correa, the Transit Administrator for Nashua Transit System. Moving into fiscal year '26, Nashua Transit System will be turning the wheels and moving into our 42nd year of providing service in the city of Nashua and the greater Nashua area. What we'd like to do is thank you for the support that we've had over the years. Without you, we are unable to move into our 42nd year. And also, we'd like to thank our transit professionals and their dedicated service to not only driving every day, 6 days a week, but also providing that infrastructure to make sure that those wheels turn and that people are able to provide reservations and to also provide the information that they need to learn more and more about our service. Also, these dedicated professionals have assisted with increasing the ridership year after year for the last 4 years as we come out of post-COVID. And happy to announce that we are going to be launching our long-awaited tech enhancement of the passenger app so that the passengers will be able to see where the bus is located. We're moving into the 21st century. We're, partway into the 21st century. We're moving in there to have that transit app available so that you'll be able to see either on your phone or on a computer where the bus is located and how quickly that bus will be to you. And it will update pretty frequently, about every 30 seconds. So it'll be an opportunity for people to be able to have that work-life, live-life balance and not have to stand at the stop waiting for a bus or wanting to be able to step out of their home or spend a little bit more time with someone or a loved one in order to catch the bus and live their life as well. So we're very, very excited about that, and that will be happening within the next few months. We're in the later stages of launching the actual software, and then we will do the app in the near future. Our ask this year for fiscal year 2026 budget is the City of Nashua local allocation will increase 3%. If you have any questions of me, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Alderwoman Kelly?
Thank you, and congratulations on your 42nd year. I might be in the same year myself.
We'll celebrate together.
Sounds good. The app that you talked about, which sounds will be a significant, investment in terms of being able to get to the buses. I'm really excited to hear about that. Is this a plug and play app that we're just putting our name on, or is this a custom build?
It is a software company that provides the software for the actual app to support the app. So that would be the GTFS, and it's kind of like Google Maps or Google Transit, so that you can see your beginning and end destination and which one of the buses you would be able to take. And so with that information, they'll be able to plan their trip and be able to also see where the bus is on an actual live route.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Can I do a follow-up?
Follow-up?
Obvious question. You didn't really address it. It seems like you're comfortable for this year, but a good amount of your funding comes from federal funding. What have you been thinking about in terms of mitigation plans, and talk a little bit about how much of your budget is federal?
Well,
Yes, good.
yeah, as Director Sullivan had mentioned, it's something that we do discuss. It is something that we spend time speaking to the federal Region 1 office to get the most updated information that we can receive on a monthly basis, and as needed more often. We also have a delegate that resides in New Hampshire that goes to the Community Transportation Association meetings and provides that feedback back so that we have an idea of what the discussions are in Washington, D.C. We also receive updated information on a regular basis as to the apportionments and when they're going to be released, and the continuing resolution was approved, so we do have the federal funding that would be able to be placed and obligated into a grant. So that has been solidified for fiscal year '25. Usually it's done a lot sooner, but it came out in May. And in regards to making decisions about service, that will really be based upon an impact and what that impact looks like. And then that would be a discussion that we would have, and Director Sullivan can address how long we would operate, depending upon if we didn't have service and how much general fund is available, if that was necessary. But that would be something that we would have to actually sit down, look at it, and then make recommendations as to what that level of service would look like.
Dr. Sullivan?
I'm happy to, again, I'm offering, I guess, a crystal ball look if I can. We've always known that transit has been underfunded within the city of Nashua. It's a good moment, and Manager Correa did this already, to thank all of you for doubling the allocation of the transit service last year because of a hole that we knew would be created, and we've plugged that hole for the time being. It's a hole that will open up again, particularly if federal funding is impacted and if the state budget is impacted. When that happens, there are a variety of things that can be done. We can either modify fares, we can modify the services that we provide, we can add more money to the equation from the general fund or other sources, and I think Camille and I are working diligently on all of those possible levers that can be pulled. But we know that funding will be an ongoing challenge for NTS on a year-to-year basis. There is not a transit system that exists, to my knowledge anyway, that does not struggle with funding on a regular basis because of the unpredictability of the FTA allocation. What I will say, and Camille and I were chatting about this today, she and her team and the team at NRPC are working right now on a comprehensive plan for Nashua Transit System that lays out sort of a short, medium, and long-term framework for where we'd like to be over the next 10 years. A big part of that is how we deal with these different funding scenarios and what we can do to modify service. So between late summer, early fall, we're going to be asking to come to the infrastructure committee, because that's technically the committee that's charged with transit duties, but we'll invite everybody, of course. Likely do a similar thing with human affairs, I think, to talk about what this comprehensive plan means and to collect feedback on it, because those two committees, I think, particularly are critical for us to hear from. We are likely going to propose sort of a prioritized set of actions that we would take in the event that funding shortage becomes very impactful to our service. And so we want to have that conversation very openly with you. We're also going to be asking the public and service agencies in advance of those meetings what increases in fares, what impacts to service or modifications to service, how would that impact them? We don't want to come to you without a sense of what the public impact would be. But again, all of that will happen over the next 6 months, but we're not blind to the fact that federal funding will continue to be a challenge.
Follow-up?
Follow-up question, Alderwoman Kelly?
Thank you. That was an incredible answer. I appreciate that. Totally not connected necessarily, but I know that last year we talked about expansion into other towns and how we were starting to do that. How's that going? How are we seeing ridership? Is that affecting budget at all right now? I was excited to see it. It was great.
Oh,
We have one
We
piece of
provide-
legislation in the books right now, aren't we, for
Yeah, Hudson and Maryland.
teaming with someone?
Yep. We are very fortunate to have community partners that provide contracted service to Nashua Transit System to provide the service into outlying areas within the region, and it's going well. Yeah. There's dedication to next year. We have the contracts moving forward in legislation, as you had mentioned, and we see that the need continues to grow, especially when people move from driving to not driving, or there's people that live in an outlying area where they would like to utilize public transportation to come into town to seek medical services or various other reasons. And we're very fortunate that we have great community partners through the RCC, at NRPC, and that Regional Coordination Council is really dedicated to providing as much service as possible to the region. And the Nashua Transit System provides a great service to the van service that complements the fixed route service for persons who are unable to access the city bus due to a physical or mental impairment.
Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Other questions? Alderman Lopez?
First, thank you very much for moving that app forward. It's going to be well respected in the community. I think people will be very happy about not having to just wait outside with inclement weather or navigating like complex things like carrying groceries. I won't have to keep making friends on the bus to Snapchat my location to. So lots of good things there.
Thank you.
And just while I'm commenting with some levity, whoever did the wrap for Joyce Heating did an amazing job. Like, it's a big wrap, and that's
I heard
speaks to
wrap like
revenue, I guess.
RIP.
It's a van that lines up completely with the wheels on the bus. Like, that kind of creativity and attention to detail. I'm glad we're marketing our bus services, but you're also making them look great when you're doing it.
Yeah, thank you.
So very appreciative of that. The Regional Planning Commission had some interaction with them, and a number of members of the public come forward following my comments on not supporting Director Sullivan's request for the rail study. There is a strong community support for transportation to the Massachusetts area where hospitals are, because there are a lot of people who are receiving medical treatment there. So as a concept, does our bus system at all work with medical insurance reimbursement, or is it like a fixed, you pay your fare and that's it?
We do not have any contracts with any insurance companies. Insurance companies have reached out to us. They have sought information. They've asked to purchase bus tickets for people to get to medical facilities. They have not contracted with us to provide actual transportation services. Also, the RPC, as you had mentioned, is working on a rides program that may be able to fill some of those gaps, and they're still in the progress of working with that. And so the RCC would be able to provide additional information, and Darna Marceau, in regards to additional questions that you may have. And I'm happy to get some more information if you need me to.
Okay, yeah, I definitely would appreciate it, and, you know, it kind of, I know it's a little bit second nature as we talk about scaling down different services because of scarcity, but maybe diversifying the revenue sources and seeing if, and we have the U-Pass agreement with the different schools, maybe there could be a H-Pass with different hospitals or something like that, so.
We have had a hospital reach out to us in the past to do such a program, and we spoke about it for over a year. Then they decided that at that time, they were not ready to move forward with it, but it was something that they would entertain for the future.
Okay, So it's, I'm glad I didn't, the only one who came up with it. I would definitely be supportive of anything like that, and anything that you need from us as aldermen, I would be happy to help with.
Thank you.
Other questions? Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since Alderman Lopez decided to bring it up, I'm going to, and before I do this, I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I know listening to us is probably painful after a day of work. But this is probably going to be to Director Sullivan as well. And I ask it because, there is a certain segment of our population that is for this, and so it's a third rail question, literally. I was one of the few that voted to keep the study, and like most things, I seem to be on the opposite end of this, of many issues, but this is one of them. And I was hoping that we were going to get the rail study maybe somewhere in this budget instead of the way it was being proposed last time. And we had a discussion where I thought it was going to be in here, and I don't see it anywhere on these pages. So what's the status of that in your budgetary?
Director Sullivan?
Yes, Alderman Tebow, first, thank you for your support. And again, I want to acknowledge that the rail study in the context it was presented was competing with a lot of other critical needs in the community. So even for those that maybe did not support that study being included, there were very good reasons why. So I first acknowledge that a no vote on the rail study was context sensitive. So I understand there's a lot of support for rail. At that time, I heard a clear indication from the board that there was an interest in seeing that included in the capital budget. Subsequent, we had a long conversation with the board about whether or not we were sticking to I think it's 1.6, if not, it's $1.4 million capital budget moving into the next year, and the answer was yes. As we worked with all of the departments and divisions to create a $1.6 million capital budget across the entire city, rail was included and considered, but ultimately, again, there were projects of higher priority and higher need than the rail study. And so ultimately, we moved in a different direction, and you will not see the rail study and the $225,000 included in the capital budget, in the fiscal 26 budget. I think you all know I've put my heart out there a little bit on this. I mean, I'm disappointed, but again, there are other needs, including allocations to both hydroelectric, the transit department, in that capital budget. And I would take those any day over the rail study because they are critical operational or capital needs. So I'm disappointed, but I'm ultimately very happy with the fact that where our real needs are today, those things were funded. I'm going to continue to try to find funding for the rail work. We just worked with Congressman Goodlander's office to advance a congressionally directed spending request to actually do not only the $225,000 worth of work, but to actually advance the project towards a project development phase in the order of about $2 million worth of expenses. We're going to continue to try and find discretionary funding, but frankly, in the environment of a 3% budget guideline and the constrained capital budget, it was not the right year to present that project, and I'm fully in agreement ultimately with where we landed, though I, of course, am disappointed.
Follow-up?
Follow-up?
So I just want to be clear that when I voted to keep the rail study in there, I wasn't advocating to cut anything else that was on that thing. So it wasn't a rail study or this thing. I was voting for everything that was in there. So I wasn't voting to cut any of that other stuff. So I thought that the other items were important as well, but I thought the rail was important if we're going to ever evolve the city into the rest of the way the rest of the country runs at this point. So I guess you kind of answered at the end, but my question is rail dead in Nashua?
No, we're talking about it right now. There's frustration about it, I think, and the lack of progress on moving it forward. I think we've limited the size of the project in a way that makes it more eligible for funding to be a Nashua First extension. And frankly, we're seeing development happen, particularly along the DW corridor, in the very areas where we would install a station. I don't think the demand will go down. There's just as much interest in going to Boston and commuting as before. I think what I really get concerned about is if we go 2 years without any progress on the work, it will stagnate. And as you've heard many times, with stagnation on this type of work, there's now a need to update the work that was already done. And so I'm highly concerned about that. You're all aware that the MBTA was surprisingly favorable to the project. I'm concerned we'll lose momentum there based on changes in administration. So you better believe that although we are not doing supplemental appropriations, or we're not planning to in the upcoming year, given if funds are available or other monies become available, I fully anticipate applying for grants and trying to move the project forward. But over time, the interest will wane.
And just one final comment.
All right.
That's exactly why I didn't want to see, and that's why I voted for it, because
Yep.
like you said, it goes dormant for a couple of years, it's gone. Like, and so there's always got to be a little progress, otherwise it will just vanish. So, thank you.
Any other questions? Alderman Kelly?
I had some questions.
Oh, Alderman Sullivan?
You called on me
Thank you.
first.
Well, he was. Alderman Sullivan, did you have a question?
I did around busing. We see that the general fund portion of the NTS budget. What is the total operating budget for Nashua Transit System, please?
Alderman Sullivan, the general operating budget is a bit of a moving target, but I think it's important to provide an answer. It's just north of $4 million, but there are a couple of factors that we simply don't know exactly where certain contracts will land moving into the new year, but it's north of $4 million in cost, and I think Manager Correa may have a more specific answer based on current projections that we've done.
That's correct.
She's confirming that what I'm saying is correct.
Okay. Follow-up, please.
Follow up, go ahead.
And what do we do for revenue from advertising, from bus passes, from the contracts that we have with outside towns?
Alderman Sullivan, are you asking for the total revenues that flow into the transit system exclusive of the federal funding and the general funding?
Yes, sir.
It may take us a few minutes to get that number for you, but I think we can provide that. We can provide a rough summary tonight if you'll allow us some time to maybe circle back to that.
That's fine. You can email it too. That's okay. Doesn't
Okay,
have to be done tonight.
I'd love to take you up on the email option because I just want to make sure we get you accurate numbers. And again, we'll take out the city's general fund allocation and we'll take out the FTA allocation. We'll likely take out the state funds as well and stick to other revenues that we collect from Farebox, contractual agreements, advertising, and those other miscellaneous revenue lines. Happy to do that.
Okay.
Again,
Appreciate
the
it.
information
Thank
should
you.
go back to Donna.
We'll send it individually to everyone. No, I'm just kidding. Sure. Happy
And
to.
don't forget a copy to Attorney Bolton.
I'm sure he'd love to read that tomorrow.
My
Did you
final
have-
question is, how long has our transportation system been funded federally? Has it always been for the 42 years?
I believe so. That includes the purchase of buses.
Okay, thank you.
It,
Alderman Kelly?
The moment has passed, thank you.
Any other questions? I got to concur that you're underfunded. And I see people on Amherst Street waiting for the bus in the pouring rain. Yeah, Alderman Lopez and others. You know, I wish we had shelters, much like we have for school kids in different places. I'm sure that's been considered, but I'm sure it's a funding issue. But there are things that we could do to even make our system even better, but we have to deal with the funding that's available. If there's nothing else, we'll move on.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I may, would it be possible to take hydroelectric operations before civic and community activities? Just in the interest of that's a.
I thought civic, that was a letter, that wasn't,
Okay, so you don't anticipate. Okay,
No.
understood. Thank you.
so the next thing is hydro.
Wonderful.
Hi, good
And
evening.
It's on, revenues are on 38, and appropriations on 106.
Ready to go. Hi, Deb Chisholm, Sustainability Department Manager, Waterways Manager, is that, guess the hat I wear when it comes to hydroelectric operations. I'll start with the revenues. As you can see, the actuals that were presented to you are a little on the low side. I just want to give a little explanation as to why, and hopefully that will help explain where I think where I think the revenues will be for the next fiscal year. As you can remember, that Jackson Mills hydro facility has been down for 2 years now. So that's a serious loss of revenue that was somewhat unanticipated. The other issue with the revenue was the end of our contract. We were selling the power from the Mine Falls facility to the New Hampshire Electric Co-op for 10 years at a rate of about 5.2 cents per kilowatt hour. And essentially, when April rolled around and the contract was over, our desire was to transition immediately to net metering that facility. Well, about 6 months later, we got approval from Eversource to do that, and in the interim, we were left at a wholesale rate of anywhere between 2 and 3 cents per kilowatt hour. So revenues were a little bit low then, but currently the net metering rate is 8.9 cents per kilowatt hour. So the funds that we received last month for Mine Falls was about $150,000+. So we are back on track as far as revenues for Mine Falls, and I have my fingers crossed that Jackson will be back up and running sometime this month. We'll be hooked up at least temporarily to the grid, and we'll be net metering there as well at 8.9 cents per kilowatt hour. For those of you that might be wondering whether the new facility will be providing us with more power generation, the quick answer is no, but the facility will, the turbine there is the same size as the other one. It's a 1 megawatt turbine. But what it will be offering us is hopefully consistent and efficient operation. So while we may not be necessarily generating any more power per se, it won't be broken as often. And now, thankfully, we'll be up and running with that equipment for the next, hopefully, 30 years. So that's revenue at a glance. I will tell you the revenues are based somewhat, although really mostly on precipitation. So I'm the one that's happy that it's been raining day after day because that is putting our revenue numbers back into a better place. So, but the weekend looks great. So isn't that what we hoped for? Like rain during the week and be nice on the weekends. Well, okay, I think that's what we're getting here. So I'm happy about that. If anyone has any questions about revenues, I'm happy to.
So we missed 9 in a row, though, weekends.
Yeah.
Questions, hydroelectric?
This was just revenue?
That was just revenue.
Just revenue?
And then we spend the money. So, no. The revenues actually go into the general fund. We don't see those, revenues. But the hydro expenses this year coming up are very similar to what they've been in the past. The only thing that I will say, again, the operating and maintenance services obviously are the highest piece of that budget. And some of that, it's a little bit of a moving target when trying to figure out what that line item proposal will be, because part of what we pay the contractor is revenue-based. And so if we have a whole lot of revenue, we also then have to pay the contractor about 15% of our revenue, and we pay that on a quarterly basis. So it becomes a little bit challenging to budget that because I don't have the crystal ball on the weather. So we do what we can to try to figure out based on historic rainfalls and what we've paid them in the past, and I think we're in a pretty good spot here. We'll see. I'm hopeful that there'll be less labor managing the Jackson Mills hydro facility in the upcoming year, but we'll see. It'll sort of a shakedown year for us.
I have a couple questions. Are we running water through the generator right now, basically generating electricity but not going anywhere?
No, we are not at this time.
So it's not being used at all.
Correct.
And
we're in the commissioning stage of the equipment.
okay. So did we ever figure out what the $350,000 Eversource was for?
I can certainly provide more details on that tomorrow night at Finance, but the The 350,000 will, a portion of that does go to Eversource labor, and it does go to contractors that they may hire to do installation of equipment. It goes to the pole farm that will be installed in the parking lot. It goes to cables. It goes to additional equipment that may not quite be specifically designated at this time. And there is a true-up at the end, so of course, at the end, if Eversource hasn't spent all of that money, they give it back.
The other question I have is, when we bought that generator, I was pretty insistent that we buy spares as well. I'm going to assume the spares came in with the generator. We have the spares here, so if there is a failure, the response time to fix it is down because we have a replacement part, and it is a modular generator so that you can replace parts.
I guess I'm not exactly clear on which generator you're talking
The
about.
new one.
Well, we have a turbine and a generator and the additional controls associated with that were purchased. The generator itself, we don't have a spare generator, no, because that generator is,
That was probably more the turbine that we had held in hostage in Europe for months and months and months.
right. And we do try to keep spare parts for things that we think might break, but, I mean, the turbine, generator, and controls, that whole contract itself was about $1.4 million.
Because
So,
the understanding is when we bought the turbine that we would get the spare parts with it.
there are some spare replacement parts that did come with it, yep.
Good. Any other questions on hydroelectric? Alderwoman Kelly?
So do you think we should start to order the turbine that we'll need in 30 years about now?
You mean the two that we might need at Mine Falls? Oh,
I have an actual question, but that's not full of sarcasm. I don't know if I've ever asked this, but there's a building rental line? What building are we renting?
there is a building rental line. That's an excellent question. That building rental line goes back to the lease agreement that we have with the current property owners of the Margaritas building. And so we provide them, because most of the equipment and everything that's out there, the powerhouse itself, is all owned by that property owner. It's not on city-owned property. And so we have a lease agreement with them that we pay them on an annual basis. We pay them a minimum of $100 a month, and then we pay them a certain percentage of the revenues. So when we have great revenues, they get a nice big check. When it's been down for 2 years, they get, as you can see, the amount already expended, $1,200. That's what they get. But once we get up and running and we get the revenues going, then we'll be back in
Thank you
shape.
for answering.
Any other questions?
I'm good, thank you.
Did we ever get the bank?
Chairman Knapp?
Oh, okay, just one second. Did we ever get the bank
Sure.
repaired?
The bank has been repaired. Is that the be-all and end-all of the repair? No. But for now, in my opinion, having looked at, I was just out there this morning looking across the river and checking that out. I do check on it at least weekly, and it looks like it's in very stable shape right now.
Yeah, the original installation of that bank was by private funds with the city saying we'd pay them back, which we never did. So any repairs are, I'm sure the city has to pay for it, so. Anyway, Alderman Sullivan, did you have something?
I did. I think I ask this question every year. Apologies. Why isn't hydroelectric an enterprise fund since revenues cover expenses?
Excellent question. We've thought about it. We just really haven't pulled the trigger on it. I do suppose that it's an option that we have discussed.
If I could just add one piece of this. Part of the challenge with an enterprise fund for this, Alderman Sullivan, is that enterprise funds need to rely on relatively stable revenues in order to be solvent. While the revenues generally are fine here, and overall the life of the facility are in quite good position, we need the ability to actually cover annual debt service payments for this facility. And by going to an enterprise fund, if we have 2 down years in a row of revenue, we may not be able to cover debt service payments in some scenarios. And so because of that volatility, there is an increased risk of going to that funding structure more than there is for a parking department, a landfill, a sewer enterprise fund. Those are much more stable than what we see at this facility because of the precipitation and the factor it plays in revenues.
I understand what you're saying, but I recall, and I could be wrong, but haven't we bonded money for the landfill and they didn't have the revenues to cover it? I vaguely remember that. I could be wrong, but just to that point, I understand that occasionally you are going to have to bond some money, but it seems like your budget compared to your revenues, and I know that you've done a historical look back before, it seems as though you certainly have that cushion to handle that. So maybe a historical look back might be appropriate for this, but I'm not going to die on this hill, but I just question, I think I question that every year, so.
All right. Any other questions on hydro? Seeing none, I think that concludes the Community Development Division.
Mr. Chair,
Yes? Mr. Director.
very
Sullivan?
quickly, there is one item I need to bring up this evening. There is a motion that we are going to seek at the first wrap-up session for community development. It was just sort of a miscommunication as part of the budget review process. I want to point out, this is a tax rate, general tax neutral request. You may recall that earlier this year, in fact, actually in late 2024, I think it was, that the Board of Aldermen created a community energy benefit rate expendable trust fund. And the idea here was that we were going to take what are called adder monies that we collect through the Community Power Coalition as part of the electricity bills that are currently being accumulated with the Community Power Coalition but are Nashua's to expend. The idea was to take those monies that were put aside and move them into a city fund so that we could then expend them. We currently have a reserve built up, I think, of about $190,000 with Community Power Coalition. Again, it's our money, but it's in an account of theirs. We didn't want to come forward with a supplemental appropriation in light of everything going on over the last 6 months to move those monies to city accounts. Additionally, although we don't currently have an adder because of the rate that's set right now, we do anticipate that we could have an adder moving into the new fiscal year. And so what we're requesting to do is to actually appropriate through a transfer $300,000. Really, it's $190,000 of monies that's already there, and potentially up to $110,000 that would be collected through the adder money in the upcoming fiscal year, and do a transfer between basically the general fund and the expendable trust fund that was created. And so I've worked with John Griffin. I'm going to come to you with a motion on the wrap-up night. There's absolutely no impact to the tax rate. This is exactly how we anticipated doing this. We just really wanted to avoid a supplemental appropriation over the last 6 months. And this does require the identification of $300,000 of transfer within the budget, and that's not reflected in what you have before you this evening. So I just wanted to flag this issue and make sure you're aware of it so that when we propose a motion through someone that evening, we're not surprising anybody.
Alderman Wiltshire?
Thank you. Do we know that the adder will be back, so to speak? Because I know it's not there now because of the rate, right?
Correct. The adder will come back only if the current Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire rate is lower than the Eversource default rate with the adder included. We don't want the adder to jump that rate to be higher than the default rate.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Two things. Once, you're saying it's going to require some kind of vote or legislation.
It will require a formal motion to amend the budget to include this interfund transfer.
I suggest that'll be coming eventually to the whole board, that you make sure it's very detailed and explaining in detail what's being done.
Will do.
Seemed like I had one other thing that was, okay, slipped my mind. But,
Alderman Dowd?
yes,
So you said you want to do it at the full board. Generally, we have all the wrap-up back and forth, and then we bring it to the full board.
well, it's going to eventually go, when we vote on the budget, to the full board. So,
But you would, I think that
so
the
when
motion
it
should
comes up
happen in
at
the
the
wrap-up.
full board,
Yeah,
when we pass the budget, the people that aren't on the budget committee will need to know what it is in detail.
We do a whole slide at that budget meeting too.
that's my point. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
good.
So we'll address it first at wrap-up, but then it gets addressed again when we pass the full
Okay,
budget.
just
at the
making sure I
full board.
understand.
All right? All set?
Yes, thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for everybody coming in, spending the evening. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make the motion to table R-25-143, which is the pending fiscal year 2026 budget by the city, and I would like this vote by roll call.
Okay, the motion is to table R-25-143 by roll call. Would you please call the roll?
Alderman Senate.
Yes.
Alderman Tebow.
Yes.
Alderman Sullivan.
Yes.
Alderwoman Kelly.
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire.
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien votes yes. Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 7 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. All right, next item is public comment. We have no members of the public here, so there's none. General discussion? Seeing none. Remarks by Alderman, I still think we need to. None.
Thank you.
Adjournment, Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make the motion to adjourn by roll call.
Please call the roll.
Alderman Senate.
Yes.
Alderman Tebow.
Yes.
Alderman Sullivan.
Yes.
Alderwoman Kelly.
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire. Alderman O'Brien votes yes. Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
You have 7 yeas, 0 nays.
We're adjourned at 9:01 PM.